Hello, this is Morris Ruddick. We've been taking a closer look at Jewish business secrets. We've seen how community, as God intends it, is designed as a gift for His followers. A few years ago, we paid a visit to a community in Eastern Europe. This group of families had expressed an interest in our entrepreneurial program. What we encountered was not only more than what we expected, it was amazing. What we found were brethren who had come together with a common purpose a little over a decade prior. That purpose was to start the first private Christian school in their nation. As a former Eastern Bloc nation, their national school system, bearing the approval authority for this venture, was comprised largely of former totalitarian adherents, who for the most part had little use for people of faith. So it was, when this small community came together with the avowed purpose of starting the first faith-based private school in their nation, even their friends told them not to waste their time, as such a thing would be impossible. Nevertheless, they were convinced they had heard from God. They were people who prayed together. So they prayerfully and meticulously put their plan together. They did their homework. And among their group were people with experience in private education. They then submitted their application. It was disapproved. They reviewed and improved their plan. They prayed even more and consulted with people who understood the realities of what they were doing. Again, they made applications simply for a private, faith-based kindergarten. This application was also disapproved, as was the third and fourth applications. Jesus told a parable about a judge who almost never ruled righteously, whose life was a reflection of wrong values. He was swayed only by the wrong kind of people. Then there came a woman who simply refused to give up. Despite this judge refusing her request, she came back to him again and again with her petition until this judge, in exasperation, finally relented to give her what she wanted, as her continual requests were driving him crazy. So it was with our friends in this Eastern Bloc country. Their fifth application was approved. They put together a program with the best teachers. They found a building in a good neighborhood in a central part of their city. The national education system of their country was as a whole substandard. So it wasn't long until this community of believers running this kindergarten was achieving an excellence that far exceeded the government-run schools. Their reputation became widely known. Even people of other faiths and non-believers wanted to send their children to this school. The demand was so great that there was a waiting list. The children loved attending the school and told their friends about it. The program they offered reflected excellence, and the students did well in the next grades. In just a few years, the school had their own building. Then those running the school began preparing an application to open the first faith-based private primary school. It was approved. And almost immediately, they had a waiting list of community members who wanted their children to attend. Word had gotten around, and people of all faiths were sending their children to this faith-based program because of its excellence. 12 years after first opening their private kindergarten, Carol and I visited them. They had just gotten approval to open a new private secondary school. They now own the 3 buildings housing the kindergarten, the primary school, and the secondary school. The respect and influence they had come from every sector of the city and its leadership. Additionally, 1 year prior to our visit, with profits from running their school. This group of brethren in this Eastern Bloc nation had purchased and began successfully operating a mobile phone franchise. Between their private schools and the franchise, they had 65 employees, which amazingly was almost the size of their small community, which had banded together and employed this gift of community through God to do something meaningful for their city. This community is an excellent example of how God's gift of community is designed to operate. God is at the center, with people of prayer who have made him their senior partner. This gift of community is like a mustard seed, the smallest of all seeds, which has the potential to grow into a tree. It is like the yeast which a woman kneads into dough, producing something that grows into a whole lot more than at the start. It reflects both the standard and the supernatural operating in the fishing community that we previously spoke of, that were described by the psalmist. It reflects the model operated by the father of the Jews, Abraham. It is a community that is God-centered and entrepreneurial. We've been taking a closer look at and unveiling the dynamics incorporated in Jewish Business Secrets. In this illustration from this Eastern Bloc Christian community, we can recognize some very specific factors that combine to overcome the adversities and bring them success. What transpired with the establishment of their school reflects the spiritual authority to overcome, which was evident in the psalmist fishing community. These combined factors are drawn from the source and foundation of the Christian faith, which is Judaism. The steps these Eastern Bloc brethren took involved some very Jewish mindsets. With close associations with Israel, this group of believers understood the roots to their faith. The standard for success from a Jewish perspective involves a different way of thinking. This different way of thinking will map out a sometimes unexpected path and set of priorities. It is a way of thinking ingrained in the Jewish culture and an important part of our discussion of Jewish business secrets. Achievement from a Jewish perspective involves dominion and faith. It is written that without faith, it is impossible to please God. Faith is a twofold response. It is our response to who God is, but it also is what He instructs in terms of our pathway in life. It will progressively involve the bridging of reality in the natural with the reality in the spiritual. Abraham's response to what God revealed to him is the foundation of what made him the father of the Jewish people. He considered that which was not as though it were, because God had told him. Faith is when we bridge the seen and unseen worlds through God and become participators in the creative process God intends for our destinies. Operating faith in this way entails an authority that can only come from God. We have shared the story of Joseph in a previous session. Joseph operated with a remarkable spiritual authority that changed the spiritual climate in each setting in which he worked in Egypt. Not only did it change the spiritual climate, but it reshaped the future and destiny, not only for Joseph, but for Egypt and the destiny of Joseph's family. The spiritual authority it employed resulted in what Scripture refers to as dominion. We'll be talking more about dominion in a future session, but for now, let me illustrate with contrasting examples. There is a dominion based on being conquered. Historically, for centuries, Japan has been a conquering nation. Following the outcome of World War II, the Harvard Business Review had articles concluding that the amazing post-World War II economic recovery of Japan was culturally the result of this conquering spirit being redirected toward the economic arena. This view doesn't negate the many positive contributions technologically and economically that have resulted around the globe due to the indomitable spirit of the Japanese. What is pertinent is the openness to competition. Some Asian nations operate big businesses through economic advantages based on largely nationalized economies. Dr. Fukuyama describes this dynamic in his book Trust, Social Virtues and the Creation of Prosperity. The government advantage is one that in civil standards represents the form of dominion achieved by means of, if not a conquering, then at least a controlling spirit. However, the God-advantaged form of dominion operates by means of trust. This benevolent form of dominion is ingrained in the Jewish outlook on life. Dominion in Scripture is the use of God's authority in a fashion reflecting greater freedom and trust, an authority given by God for the ultimate good of a community and society. The example of Joseph reflects how when Joseph was but a slave, he had great influence, but a trusted influence because of the recognition of the mantle he bore to be blessed, to be a blessing. I've previously mentioned the issue of power in a nurturing culture designed as a safe place. A society that encourages private ownership is a very Jewish concept. Trust societies began with the Jews. Trust societies foster a middle class. Free enterprise does not have its origins in the West, but rather with the Jews. It is written that one will put 1,000 to flight and two, 10,000. Moses wrote that God's people would be the head and not the tail, that they would be above all the other societies of the earth. This gives insight into the disproportionate achievement of Jews being awarded 27% of the Nobel Prizes since 1950, despite being only 1/4% of the world's population. We've been talking about Jewish business secrets, the factors that for centuries have made Jews to be known as the people of business. Dr. Fukuyama points to the cultural foundations of enduring economies. The Jews have long understood this, defying the odds as a culture within the cultures of which they have been a part. They have embraced this gift of community not only for their own benefit, but as a means by which they have become a blessing to those around them. We're going to be talking more about this community in this series, specifically about community strategies and secrets that have been employed to aid Jews in being successful in business over the ages. We're also going to be talking about an important dynamic at the core of our entrepreneurial program, which we've referred to as community building. However, in our next session, we will discuss still another important aspect ingrained in Jewish thinking: stewardship.